'Tis the time of year to spread composted manure. I don't know if it's dry enough out, but we're going to try a few loads and see what happens. The H is a little dusty. She's been sitting all winter. Spread over in this field. It tends to stay pretty dry on the high side. She sure does do a good job. Spreads it right out. Sinking in hardly at all. That's a load, doesn't take long. It's back to get another load. Let me introduce my cast of characters here. This is my 1940H, and this is my new idea 12A manure spreader. They were made between 48 and 55 as I remember, and I have no idea why, but they measure both manure and fruit in bushels. This is a 90 bushel spreader. It's really small compared to the modern spreaders, about 3 bucketfuls off the loader. When I got this spreader, it was all rotted out and the back end was all rotted off, so my dad and I stripped it all down, made a new metal back end for it. This is all new here. Mounted the existing sprockets to the new metal. It was wood originally going back here with all kinds of shields that we didn't replace, and then I made a pressure treated box for it. Had to age the pressure treated inside, let it dry out. I tongue and grooved it, cut it to fit, painted the matching logos on it like it originally had. This spreader works great. Once in a great while a chain will skip a sprocket and I have to retension the chains, but other than that, keep it greased, it's reliable. I'll show you how this spreader works. It's really simple. So you got one lever here that's either engaged or disengaged. Engaged is down here, and that actuates this rod, and when this rod drops down, it drops the chain on this sprocket here and engages all the beater mechanism, all these chains back here to run all these beater bars, and that's driven by the wheel here, which the gear is connected to. And on this side, you've got the apron chain control. So this lever has got multiple notches in it, and each time you go down, the apron chain moves a little faster. It ratchets back and brings the load off the spreader. That's connected to this lever here, which comes down and measures how much this roller engages with this star wheel. So the deeper it engages, the more it'll push back and forth and runs down to this rod here and ratchets on this gear here, so it brings the apron ahead in little increments, and that's driven by this wheel. Third gear, throttle up, away we go. And what happens with this compost is the grass grows right up through it, and by the time the cows get here to graze in April and May, it'll be just about gone. The earthworms come up, and if the grass is taller and grows through it, it pretty much melts right into the ground. It does so many good things for the ground. The earthworms work up through it, and it makes them aerate the top surface of the ground because they work their way up and get into these clods of compost. It just does so many wonderful things. It increases moisture retention. Those aren't things that you'll get out of granular fertilizer. It adds topsoil gradually over time. Lots of good stuff here. And by the time I go to make hay off this field, if I do make hay off this field, the haybine won't pick up any of this stuff. It'll be completely gone by then. It just, like I said, the earthworms and the other insects just work it right down in the ground. I check out the chains after every run, make sure none of them are starting to get clogged up with manure. Like I said, there was a lot of guards on this spreader that aren't here anymore. They had rotted off. I need to make a new set of them someday, but it's not too high on my priority list. You know, I'm sure there's lots of people that say, oh, you should get a bigger manure spreader. That's too much to spread. Or you should get a skid steer. But I really like working with old equipment. It's one of the charms of having a small farm for me. I just enjoy getting out and on it. If it takes a little more time, I don't mind. Over the course of this spring, I'll spread 80 to 100 loads out of that spreader in here. And I do it over a course of weeks. I'll spread 5, maybe 10 loads a day. And then I go on to do other things. It's nice to break the work up. These piles have got tons of good stuff on them. All the best stuff from the farm. They've got, of course, cow manure mixed with hay, wood chips, which we also mix in with carbon that we get free from our local town from when they trim trees. It's got chicken manure in it from when we clean out the chicken houses. It's got pig manure in it from when we clean out the chickens or the pigs' winter pen and the brood pigs' pens. It's got chicken guts in it from when we slaughter chickens, as well as turkey guts and feathers. It's a nice brew of all kinds of good stuff. We run 2 piles of compost. This pile is 2 years old, and this pile is from last winter and last summer. We let the compost rot for 2 years before we spread it, so this one won't be spread until 2022. And the idea is composting the manure rather than spreading it when it's raw helps to lock in some of the soil nutrients that are in the manure, things like nitrogen, which might escape as gas. If you compost them properly, it'll lock it up and you can wind up putting that into the soil. We've done this for 8 years now, and we've never had to put any, quote, chemical fertilizers on the soil. No granular NPK fertilizers, the standard ones. We just put on composted manure, and so far our pH has remained stable, where usually the pH drops around here and you have to reapply a lime every so often. Ours doesn't. We just had the soil tested last fall. The only thing our soil has become a bit deficient in is phosphorus, and that's one of the things that I knew. If you make hay off of fields, eventually you're going to run into issues with that. And we make our own hay. All of our fields are combination hay and grazing, so we'll be adding phosphorus. But the other principal nutrients and the things you can't measure, like soil bacteria, are doing awesome in our soils. And every year our hay yields and our pasture yields stay right up there. And I'm happy about that, because I heard that fertilizer went through the roof this year. My composting system certainly isn't optimal. It does part of the job, but not the whole thing. The piles are too big, and it goes anaerobic, which is a much slower way to compost than aerobic when you've got more oxygen going into the pile. The piles should be kept a little drier than they are, but it would take quite a bit of work for me to get it to that optimal stage. I'd have to turn them more often. I turn them once a year, so I do the best I can, and I think it's still better than spreading raw manure. Is a beautiful sight and sound. That's kind of a big load. I try to take it easy on this old spreader, but sometimes the manure gets heaped up. You know, in my mind, the only, well, not the only, but the principal reason I restore this old equipment is to use it. It doesn't sit in the barn, and this is how I get my jollies. I love taking it out and working it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and have a great day.